Hi there, this is Sheena Rowlands and today I'm sharing with you my latest Simple Stories Saturdays layout. Now for this time I'm going to use the Simple Stories Full Bloom. It's possibly one of my all-time favourites from them, and obviously I've used this plenty of times before, so I'm going to use some of my leftovers to create a layout for you today. So I'm just going to take this flower paper, I'm going to actually do an edge on either side, and I'm going to use a little bit of the honeycomb too. So I actually end up cutting just some strips with the scissors, and then I'm going to come in and fussy cut them in just a moment. So I actually want to fussy cut around the honeycomb edge just to give some points, and I'm going to finish this off camera, but I'm going to actually have them on either side of this layout. So I've done those, and now I'm just going to mark on the cardstock potentially where the edges are going to be, because I want to do some mixed media in the centre, and there's no point doing it knowing I'm going to cover it up. So I'm just using some distress inks here in shades of yellow. I'm just using some packaging. I'm just going to get some ink on down the centre of this white cardstock, and it's just plain smooth cardstock. I don't want to add too much water to it because I don't like it when it gets too bendy, and I'm not the best at mixed media, so bear with me because it does take my time. You can see I keep offering up the photograph. That's because I just want to see that I am going to have some mixed media sticking out either side of the photograph. At this time I'm thinking the photo is going to go a little bit on the right rather than the centre, but I do change my mind about that later on. So I'm just adding a couple of different shades of yellow just to add a little bit of contrast, but as I'm watering it down, they are all still quite pale. Now I'm doing this part of this layout whilst away from home, so this is a temporary setup. This is what I do when I'm away at a crop or a retreat, so it looks a little bit different to where I normally am based. I actually have more room at this retreat than I would normally do at home, but actually I feel like I've got everything crammed either side of me, so I do apologise. But I'm just getting this sorted. So I'm using my glass mat there to put the inks on, just so it's easy to clean up at the end. The photograph of the bee was taken by my brother. He's a fabulous wildlife photographer, and I've used his photos before, but this is one I thought was stunning and very suitable for this Simple Stories range. So I've come back in with the inks, and I'm just flicking some spots of them over the top just to add a little bit more, and then I'm going to just see if there's any gaps or any areas. If I'm not getting it exactly where I want, I do add it with a brush and then just put the packaging over the top just so I get the same effect. So I've let that dry, and I'm coming back in now, and I'm looking at adding the paper strips down the side. So I'm just distressing the edges of the flowery one, and then I'm going to try and curl them a little bit as well. And as you can see, the two honeycomb strips are already cut. That's just a nod to the fact it's going to be a bee photo, really. I thought it just seemed to work really well. So I'm just going to make sure that they are all curled enough. I'm just adding a little bit of texture really to those edges, and then I will think about sticking them down. So I'm not very good with wet glue, so I'm going to bring in some double-sided tape. I've had a couple of inquiries about that. It's a Scotch double-sided tape, Scotch 3M. I tend to buy it online. It's not expensive at all, and I tend to buy it in bulk because I go through quite a bit of it. It's reasonably forgiving, particularly when you put something down that you can move it pretty much straight away, but long term it will stick it really well. I've had no problems with things coming apart in older albums, but I am generally not so good with wet mediums. I've had a few accidents over the years, so I tend to stay away from it. So I'm just sticking the honeycomb to the flowery, and then I'm going to stick them to the white. Just so I've got everything in exactly the right place that I would like it to be. So I always take my time when I do things like this, just to make sure it's the way I imagined. Now you may not have been for a Simple Stories Saturday before. Just to let you know, this is a once a month YouTube hop, and you'll find all the names of all the participants listed below. The one thing in common obviously is we're all using Simple Stories ranges, but you'll find that we're all using different ranges every month. So, and we've all got very different styles, but it's a really nice bunch of people. So actually, I really recommend that you hop round everybody and see what they've been making, particularly if you've got some of these ranges in your stash, loads of ideas and inspiration. You'll also find some of them are also on, the images are on Instagram as well, but this is mainly a YouTube hop. So I've now come in with some circle stamps that I've got, and I'm going to add a few circles over the packaging. That's obviously the ink that's obviously dried. Some of these circle stamps actually had circles inside them, so I do go in with a pair of sharp scissors and I will cut those out because I don't want the darker or the full circle in the centre. I thought I'd stuck the sides down, but I obviously still haven't got around to doing that. I'm just looking at the positioning. I think maybe it's because I wanted to make sure my stamp block went over the top. So that's why I've not actually finally made that choice of sticking them down. So I've used some of these circle ones. I'm also going to bring in an old Stampin' Up one in a moment as well. But I'm just dotting them around over the top of the packaged ink just to add a little bit more mixed media. I then remember that I've got a honeycomb stencil in my stash. So I'm going to go back to the yellow inks, and I brought in one of those brushes. It always looks like a makeup brush. I don't have them that they're specifically for each colour. I don't use them enough, but I do actually wash them straight after using them so that actually they can be used for other similar toned colours. So I'm just going to keep lifting the stencil up and down just to make sure I've got like the depth of colour that I'm after, and I'm going to go over the circles and the packaging with various of these distress inks. And it gives a really nice feel with the brush. It gives it a softer look for the hexagons or whatever they are. I think they're pentagons. I'm not sure. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Over the stencil, it gives a softer look around rather than using one of the foam bits. You know, the ones that you get where you put on a wooden handle. So yeah, I really like the look that they give, and I'm going to invest in a few more, I think. Not necessarily need one for each colour because I don't do enough like that, but really like the way it's looking actually. So and because I've used the same shades again, it all complements each other. So I'm just bringing in the strips and the photograph just to see how it looks. Now I've got this Stampin' Up stamp, and I've just gone on and added some bits of they're like dots, using that in the same black. So I'm bringing all the bits and pieces in from the ephemera that I think might be useful, and I'm starting to think on how I'm going to build this layout up. So lots of bits to look at. Always like, this is one of my favourite parts when you start to go through all the ephemera. I don't really want to cover everything up, and I don't really want to cover too much of the photograph up either. So that's the sort of thing that's running through my mind at this stage, trying to figure out what I want to add to it. So I don't know about yourselves. Do you have a complete idea of a layout before you make it? Does it evolve as you go along? Or do you just wing it like I feel like I'm doing here? I think everybody has a different way of doing it. I don't get lots of thinking time in advance. I do try and pick a photo that I think will go with a range like I did for this. And then particularly when you've already started through a collection, I like to see what I have and then see how I can get it to come together. I brought in a couple of papers, and I felt that the photo needed a couple of layers behind it. And so I picked a red because I think that goes really well with the reds on the side in the flowers, and obviously the colour that's in the photograph as well. So I think that's quite complementary. So I'm just adding a bit of tape just so that I can tape that together, and I'm just scuffing the edges up and having a look at putting that into position. It's not coming together as quickly as I would have liked at this stage, but sometimes that's just the way it happens. I also know that I'm away and I'm on a bit of a time limit, and it's not far before this event finishes. So I think, do I really want to rush it? No, I might actually just hold on a little bit. So I bring back in the inks, and I decide I definitely want to add a little bit more of the mixed media, and because I really like the way that's looking. So I thought I'll do that now, and then I'll give this layout a chance to dry while I have a think of how I want it to look long term. So just keep bringing the photograph in just to see where the edges might go, so I can make sure that anything I add now is going to be seen. So here we are now back at my house, and it's a couple of days later and it's time to get this layout finished. So I've decided I'm actually going to run now with a central design. I have still got all the ephemera here on the left, but I've definitely cut it down to things that are a little bit more specific. So there's flowers and there's insects and there's titles. So I find that sometimes by limiting what's in front of me, then actually it will focus my attention a little bit and give me a chance to finish the layout, because I do have a tendency to take my time even when I don't really have a lot of time. So by focusing my attention, it definitely shortens the time that each layout takes me, if that makes sense. So I'm looking at doing a column down the centre now over the top of the mixed media, so there's plenty of it that will still show on either side. So I'm just looking through the pieces. I definitely want something above and below the photograph. I've definitely liked the flowers, potentially adding a few more to go below the photo. I think that's quite appropriate with that bee actually in a flower as we look at it in the photo. And now it's just looking what else would make that column look good down the centre. Still got loads and loads of this collection, as I said. I think some maybe came in a kit and some that I'd already purchased. So I think I've got doubles of some of the chipboard and things, but it will all get used, as I said. I really like these quirky bees. There's a few that have got like a trail behind them, so I'm going to try and dot some of those around. So they're just sitting there on the side at the minute so that I don't forget or miss them out, but I think they would be a great way of filling some of the gaps. Now I'm just bringing in this title. I think it's one of the only things that's not from the range. The word summer is a shenanigans. It's a 3D printed plastic word. It's a small company that I own and run, and I sell 3D printed shapes for scrapbooking, card makers, journalers online. I'll leave a link in the comments below. So that's where the titles come from, and I think I may bring in a couple of flowers nearer the end from the same range. So it's just a little business. You probably haven't heard of me, but that's okay. I'm relatively new, so I'm going to add that as my title. I'm going to use one of the foam words with flowers underneath it, so it's Summer Flowers is the title. I do like the Hey Honey that I picked at the top. I think it's quite good with the beehive above it, and I really like the composition of this central column now. So I'm just checking what else is available, whether I've got any other bees that need to go on or any other insects that would be useful to add, but I'm really liking the way that it's now going. And I now feel that it's pretty much getting there. So I'm just going to see what needs sticking down, what needs adding in. I like the way the balance with the bees. I'm going to look into add an odd number if I can, so that they help your eye travel round. And there we go. I'm going to add some flicks of white paint off camera just to break up the solidness of the title. So here's the finished layout and the peaks. Please hop round the rest of the team. They'll be thrilled to see you there. Do leave a comment, give a thumbs up, subscribe. Thanks for watching. Bye now.